Hey everybody, I'm Shane Ireland. Welcome to another episode of Tasting Notes. I am back on track with my mission to smoke through all of the HU tobaccos. And today I have selected HU's Dark Moor. Dark Moor, I think, is one of the sort of like cult classics in the HU line. It is one that I personally had never had a chance to sample previous to them being available in the US for the first time. So what happened was there was an open tin floating around the office several weeks ago, and I didn't know anything about the blend. So I stuck my nose in the tin and immediately like kind of was fooled. I thought like, oh, this is like an English or like some sort of like Virginia Oriental English, maybe there's some Latakia in here. And then as soon as I like checked the actual tin description, I realized that Dark Moor is actually made from a couple of different grades of brown Virginia, so darker Virginias, Perique and Kentucky. And it's listed as Kentucky. I definitely think there's probably been some fire curing here. I'm not 100% sure, but that sort of very sharp, very woody, almost mesquite-like note comes through in the tin note and the smoke. So basically, Dark Moor is a really, really rich blend of some of the most rich and strongest tobaccos that you can find. So that sounded interesting, and now that I've been smoking it, I can tell you it definitely is interesting. So real quick, I already went through the components. Grades of brown Virginias, a pretty healthy dose of Perique from what I can tell, and Kentucky. Now, I don't know if that means that there's technically both regular Kentucky varietals here and maybe some dark fired, but I definitely get at least a little bit of that spice, that smoky, woody, spicy quality. And again, I wouldn't expect that was coming from the Perique or the Virginias. There is a good bit of sort of like a burly earthiness too, so I'm wondering if that means that there is more than one type of Kentucky in here. Extremely rich tin note, very pungent, very sharp, not very much sweetness. It's a lot of spice, it's very woody, and it has those sort of aromatic qualities to it, like the woodiness, like I want to say mesquite, but it's different than that. It's a little bit of that campfire sort of vibe, but with woods that are a little bit more aromatic in quality, I guess is the best way I could describe it. I do get a nice bready sort of note here. Again, it's on the tangier side, maybe more like sourdough. Not a ton of sweetness, but like I said, it has all of those nice, sharp, spicy, woody, and robust notes in the tin. And I think that's a pretty good indication of how the smoke is as well. So, really, really good cut too. I'm a big fan of the sort of mixed ready rub. We have some slightly larger chunks in here of pressed tobacco and some ribbons. I think that this is really, really well suited to just sort of cramming directly into the pipe. If you're smoking a larger group size or if you're planning to smoke outside under like windy conditions, it'll keep the burn nice and slow and give you a little bit of sweetness and let the flavors develop throughout the bowl. Now, personally, because I favor smoking inside and I tend to smoke slightly smaller pipes, I did give this one an extra little bit of like a rubbing out and fluffed it up a little bit. Moisture content out of the tin is perfect. I don't know if you can see this from there, but that's about exactly what I'd want to see. Even though there's compressed pieces of tobacco in there, it unfurls nearly immediately when I give it a little bit of a pinch between the fingers there. So yeah, really, really well, packs really well, takes to the flame really well, passes all those checks. Man, on the first light, blast of flavor. Definitely a good bit of spice, extremely woody, dry finish, tangy quality from those darker Virginia grades. There is a very aromatic, nearly incense-like quality that I would typically associate with either Orientals or with Latakia itself. There's just enough of almost like a molasses kind of a flavor. I still think the finish is dry. There's not a ton of sweetness in this blend, but there's just a little bit of that sort of molasses vibe that really ties everything together. Very spicy through the retrohale. Again, lots of woodiness. The sort of light, there's a little bit of that dark fruit vibe coming from the Perique, like dark red fruits, maybe even a little bit of that fruit leather. Definitely some pepper on the retrohale as well. That nice sort of fermented, funky character that I associate with some Burleys and also with Perique. Yeah, actually, I don't know. I'm back and forth on whether or not I'm actually tasting dark fired Kentucky or if it's just Kentucky varietals. If it is just Kentucky varietals, it reminds me of sort of the very powerful, very dark, like African grown Burleys. There are elements of Dark Moor that remind me almost of some of the Kendall made Burley Virginia flakes. Maybe even some of the ropes, the stronger ones. You have almost that like. This is going to sound crazy, but when I smoke some of those darker African Burleys, particularly like the ropes and stuff like that from the Gowith houses, I almost get it's an earthiness, but it almost approaches something that reminds me of like asphalt, which sounds insane, but it's actually very appealing. Also, in like peated Scotch, you have those sort of medicinal like qualities. A lot of people would say Lefroy tastes like Band-Aids, like iodine, stuff like that. And I do get some of those like heavier, let's say aromatic qualities and be generous, but it balances really well with the tanginess from the Virginias, almost sour-like quality from those darker Virginias, and the sort of like fruity and spicy Perique. Actually, it's in the tin description. I think that the Kentucky is of a peaty nature, and now that I'm remembering that, that's exactly what I'm tasting here. This is like smoking Ardbeg 10. It has like those nice peaty qualities, earthiness, just a little bit of sweetness, like a little bit of that barrel character that's sort of like on the vanilla side. But the finish is long, dry, complex, with a little bit of those medicinal notes, a little bit of an incense-like quality. Yeah. This is also a stronger one for sure. I would say medium plus, firmly medium plus. Being that it's like relatively early in the day right now, and I have been smoking mostly much milder tobaccos recently, I definitely feel this one right away. I think the guys out there that are really big fans of Solani Aged Burley Flake, like I said, the more big, powerful blends from the Gowith houses, if you're into any of that sort of stuff, if you like Toscanos, which again, I love Toscanos. It's like dark fired and Scotch. I mean, the two of my favorite things, and Dark Moor has that vibe to it. Today I'm smoking HU Tobacco's Dark Moor in a little sandblasted apple by Former. I picked this pipe because even though it's still very much in my size range of preference, it has just a little bit bigger of a chamber. It's somewhere between a Group 3 and Group 4, and I really wanted to let those robust flavors develop and again, find a sort of a medium for myself between fully rubbed out and the actual rough, ready rub cut directly from the tin. And I think what I'm getting out of this is as the bolt progresses, the Kentucky, which I think was like front and center on the first light, starts to form more of a base, and I start to get the impression, I start to feel and notice the darker Virginias a little bit more, even verging on some citrus-like notes. A malty character, but mostly still like just dark and rich and woody. That sort of woody base lets the spice from the Perique and the sort of dark fruit notes from the Perique, and then some of the tangy and sour bread-like malty, and again, I'm getting woodiness too that I think is different from the Kentucky, and I'm going to attribute that to those darker Virginias, those brown Virginias. But it's just a really, really nice full-bodied, spicy, but balanced. It's a very interesting combination. Yeah, if you're a fan of McBaron's HH Bold Kentucky, but you want something that's a little bit more of an all-day smoke, if you're into darker Virginias and Virginia Periques, this is going to give you a little bit more complexity, a little bit more woodiness, a little more spice, and a little bit more oomph. And I think if you're normally a burley smoker, or if you're into the really strong blends made by the Galwith houses, this one's going to find a really special place in your rotation. I'm also going to say that, like, I wouldn't have guessed this going into it, but Dark Moor pairs extremely well with a cup of coffee. Yeah, it's got just sort of this tannic quality. The woodiness is really pronounced, the spice, a little bit of pepper, and a lot of tang from the Virginias, and a super dry finish that's very long. Again, if you like bold tobaccos, if you like bold scotch, you can't go wrong here. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.